Okay, we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us at Madhi Mandram today. Today, obviously, we have Ms. Devyani from Pratham and Ms. Harani from JPAL with us at Madhi Mandram. We will definitely be doing some detailed introductions, but before we get started, um, going over some basic meeting rules. One is that we will be recording this session. This is primarily to ensure that people who are not able to join us today can benefit from the same. Requesting Helena to start recording.
Yes, re-recording.
Thank you. Going over some basic rules, let's ensure that all of us remain muted. It is the people who are joining us need not keep their videos on, and there would be time for dedicated Q&A at the end. So requesting all of us to wait for the Q&A parts to start to ask questions. And before we just get started, we have a small poll that we request all the participants to answer. Is the poll active?
Yes, it is.
Okay. We'll just give the participants a minute to answer the poll before we start. Great. Thank you for everyone who has answered the poll. And before we sort of get started, I wanted to call out that Mr. Anustup from Center Square Foundation was supposed to join us today. But unfortunately, due to some personal circumstances, he could not join us. But we hope to take the session forward with the rich experience that Ms. Devyani and Ms. Harani bring on board. So let's get started. The theme for today's Mandram is that slowly and steadily after schools remaining closed for over 19 months, the schools are reopening. And the need for child-centric classroom learning is becoming increasingly relevant, especially at a time when there is a mounting crisis in terms of equitable access to high-quality education. And COVID has overall exacerbated these challenges due to the digital divide that exists in the country. And hence, there is an increased focus on child-centric methods that must ensure that we are able to meet the student learning outcomes. Through Madhi's work over the past 5 years in government school classrooms, we have observed that there is always a need for a contextualized mode of differentiated instruction and level-based learning. And with nearly more than 90% of the primary school classrooms in Tamil Nadu being multi-grade, which basically means that a teacher has to teach more than one grade at the same time. So this figure here in front of us sort of depicts this problem very clearly. As a teacher, I'm expected to teach children from class 1, children from class 2, and children from class 3 as well. And each of these children have their own learning needs over and above the curricular expectations that the syllabus puts on them. So this being the case, what can sort of an elegant solution look like, right? And this is not a problem that plagues a particular state of such. This is a problem that is ubiquitous, a problem that plagues the entire country and almost all primary school classrooms. Now, there are other challenges that increase, other facets that increase this problem as well. So, because of the rapid increase in demand for English medium classrooms, we also have teachers who teach the vernacular medium, or L1 as it is called, and English medium L2 within the same classroom. So it's sort of like the children, the teachers have to navigate now this whole myriad of combination of both the classroom and also the medium of instruction that they are expected to follow. And this is true for nearly 20% of the teachers in our country. And last but not the least, another facet of the same problem is that in the primary schools in our country, the concept is that the teacher is sort of the parent-teacher sort of a concept, where the teacher teaches all the subjects inside the classroom, which means a single teacher is not only expected to teach all the 3 grades at the same time, they're also expected to teach all the subjects for all the 3 grades. That is, a teacher has to teach the home language, English, mathematics, science, social science, all of it to 3 grades of children, all sitting together in the same classroom. And the question we are really grappling with is that how do teachers really teach? How can learning be effective in such a environment, especially as we are reopening schools after COVID? What can an elegant solution for something, a problem as chronic as this look like? Definitely a potential solution could be level-based learning, but the adoption of such a methodology is not without its challenges. Through this forum, we are hoping to explore the pedagogical, logistical, and policy perspectives around the need for level-based teaching and learning in primary school classrooms across the country. I am Srivatsan Ramaswamy, and I lead the Foundational Learning Improvement Program at MADI. And it is my pleasure to invite our speakers today. Ms. Devyani leads the international collaborations at Pratham, involving supporting governments and NGOs in international contexts to learn from and adapt Pratham's innovation. As part of the Teaching at Right Level Africa initiative, she also leads the technical strategy and approach and manages partner relations across several tall Africa countries, as well as building donor relationships and grant management. Devyani comes with valuable insights through her 10 years of experience in managerial, collaborative, and leadership roles. Welcome, Devyani.
Thank you, Shatsan.
And we have Ms. Harini, who's a research scientist from JPAL South Asia. She has over, again, 10 years of experience in conducting randomized controlled trials in education and health, and she has been a part of the research team evaluating Pratham's Teaching at the Right Level programs across multiple states. Her current research involves working with renowned cognitive psychologists from the Harvard Lab of Development Studies to develop math games and at leveraging children's intuitive abilities to enhance math learning outcomes. She also works with JPAL's capacity building team to provide technical advisory and training on use of data for policy decisions to a variety of government and civil society organizations. Welcome, Harini. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Srivatsan.
So without further ado, I'll sort of invite Devyani to just share her views on the topic from her rich experience. I think it will be great for us to hear from her.
Great. Thank you so much, Srivatsan, and hi to everybody who's here. I think this is my first interaction with MADI, so I'm looking forward to also hearing maybe your reflections and questions as you hear from Harini and I today. So I think, as if I assume many of you here are familiar with Pratham's work, especially in the Indian context. And I think, we came up with this idea of teaching at the right level, or many of you might know it as Kamal in India, looking at the current situation that was present in the classroom now already more than 20 years ago. right? And what you were describing, Srivatsan, at this moment, while you were talking more about a specific context, we know we've been seeing this situation for many, many years, right? One of our main aims was to first understand the problem better. So logistically, we know what's happening in the classroom, but what is the teacher really doing in terms of managing the different learning levels? And we knew that children are not learning, but we didn't quite know where they actually are. So what do they actually know? And how can we get them to a place where we want them to be? Which, of course, I think the easiest way to understand is what the curriculum is trying to achieve. So not many of you might know this, but actually the ASER type assessment, which we see today, as part of the ASER survey and also in various Pratham programs and many other education programs, was actually born out of this work on the ground. So as we were trying to support children, we said, can we really, figure out what's happening with children's learning? And that's how this tool was born. And that allowed us to understand that, we need to take several steps back from the curriculum. And again, we're talking about now at least 15 years ago, that we need to take several steps back from the curriculum and say, where are children in our classrooms, especially when we're talking about these primary grades? Do they even have the basic skills or the foundational skills to be able to continue with what the system is trying to help them learn? And I think we all will appreciate that that's not the case, right? Children don't have the foundational skills even in place to be able to continue with curriculum. So as Pratham, of course, majority of our effort over the past 20 years has been on trying to solve this very specific problem. And that's where our level-based, grouping, programming, strategy comes into play. That how can you use, a different approach within the classroom, whether you already have this naturally because you have multi-grade classrooms, or creating this kind of scenario of level-based grouping for children to at least ensure they have the foundational skills in place. And we found that, if children are grouped according to their current learning levels, in the case of foundational reading and math, it helps them to get started very quickly on moving forward, as opposed to being in a typical classroom setup, which expects them to be at a particular level and is trying to get them to reach there. So is pegged at the level that we want them to be rather than the level that they currently are. So today we hear about teaching at the right level, and we often hear other terminologies like differentiation, like streaming. And I think what is important to understand about Pratham's approach is that when we say teaching at the right level, we really mean that we want to start at the level of the child, right? Not set a path or a trajectory for child learning, but really to say, where are children today and how can we take advantage of having that information to help them progress forward quickly, right? Because if children don't know how to read and don't know how to do math in a grade 3 classroom and in a multi-grade classroom, like you said, clearly the teacher's got a very, very big challenge on her hands, whether she's dealing with one grade or multiple grades. She has this huge variation in her classroom and does not know who to teach what to. So it's not just about reorganizing children into levels to teach them again different stages of the curriculum. It's about taking several steps back, and which is even more important today as we come out of the pandemic, to say, how do we ensure at least foundational skills are in place? Then we can think about the curriculum, right? As opposed to saying, how can we find different ways of teaching that curriculum when children don't even have the basic skills? And I think, as we all might appreciate, we've had significant success with that approach, but it is a big departure from how school systems think. And even with the new education policy in place, I don't think it's a natural process for school systems to, say, yes, we need to focus on foundational skills. We need to focus on reading and math. There is a tendency to again get, pulled by the needs and the expectations of the curriculum, rather than really saying, let's take a break. Let's make sure everybody's at least at this basic level and help them move forward. And teaching at the right level is just one way to do that. There may be many other ways to do that. But having that foundation in place, I think we've seen, is absolutely essential for any further learning. And we've seen this with our work beyond teaching at the right level as well, but I'm happy to talk more about that later if that's useful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Devyani. And at this juncture, I'll sort of request Harini to give her opening remarks as well.
Yeah. So I think I just have to say that I come from almost like a complementary view that Devyani brings, right? So around the time, I think, Devyani was also working at Pratham. We sort of were working together with the teams to see how TRL, is it effective, right? I think that's the question that we always grapple about, and I think grapple with. And I think for me, what really struck about the Teaching at the Right Level programs is that it's extremely robust, right? So we've seen multiple evaluations. We've seen that this is a program which might be very simplistic in the way sometimes it's described, but it's really not. It's a very effective program, and it has worked when it's been implemented by government teachers within classrooms, or in the summer camp mode by volunteers within classrooms, or in having these camps outside of classrooms in communities and so on. Right? So I think being able to sort of come up with a program that is not only sort of impactful. There are lots of programs that are very impactful, but it might be impactful only in a certain setup. But this is not, right? So I think that's the beauty of TARL. And I think, to sort of add to what Devyani was saying, what is interesting about this is it addresses a very specific need, right? A large majority of the children in India do not possess grade level abilities. I think all of us know this, and we've talked about this a lot. But even when you have teachers themselves, I've had conversations, they kind of informally acknowledge this, right? They say, yes, this is how it is, but I have to finish the syllabus. It's always but I have to finish the syllabus, right? And what I liked about TARL is that you have a lot of materials, but nobody is coming and telling you that this has to be finished. No. The objective over there really for the teacher is make sure the child gains that particular skill and goes to the next level, right? And then you progress. So it's like graduating across the levels. And I think that is a very nice way for the teacher to sort of visualize the progress and having that, that kind of a measuring system set up as a part of the program was something which is extremely useful. And I think the other thing also is even when the teachers say that, oh, you know what, I do realize that there's heterogeneity. I know I might have to cater to these people, but I don't know how to cater to it, right? So I've also sat in some of these teacher trainings, and it's very nice. They kind of wave their hand around. All these trainers will come and say, oh, but you know this, na? If your child is not doing this properly, just make it easy. You give real life example. Okay, but what's next? Maybe that's not enough, right? And I think what I really liked, when I was sitting in the field and seeing this intervention happening, is that very simple targeted materials and a variety of materials, right? Like your story cards and worksheets and the games with the hopscotch with numbers and letters and so on. And I think these are all very important, right? You're giving the teacher the tools to use in a classroom, which may not always be the case in other setups. So I think all these things make it, the Pratham TRL program not only very effective, but also something which can be adapted quite easily by teachers. And I want to just sort of share an interesting experience I had. This was my first evaluation in Haryana. And I was in the training where Pratham was training these, very jaded block resource coordinators. And the idea was, they will be trained first, then they will do, 2 weeks of classes in summer so that they understand the program. So that when it's rolled out to the teachers, they can sort of, mentor the teachers and monitor and so on. So you can imagine, right, sitting at SCRT with all these people who have 20 plus years of experience, and no one's really convinced. They are saying things like, you are making children dumber by, teaching them such simple things and so on. So we said, okay, just listen to us and then go to the field. So I think I was in the field with Rukmini ma'am on literally the first or second day of this experiment in Haryana. And we walk into a school and this person says, we didn't realize the situation was so bad. Because as Devyani said, there was nobody who actually evaluated the children in that way, right? So when they went and they used the ASER tool and they assessed the children, they were like, oh my God, I mean, this is a serious problem. So I think that was a big win, right? Like acknowledging that a problem existing is always like a big win. Then after 2 weeks, they came back to us and they said, this child couldn't identify, Hindi numerals. But then after 2 weeks, this person was able to read could even read like a 2-letter word or something like that. And what really happened then was this kind of an acceptance that, yes, we have a problem. And there's this change, right? To see that there is, even in a very short period of time, which is like 2 weeks, there is a marked improvement. So that, I think, really helped to sort of give the idea to, these really jaded people that this can happen in the field, right? There can be changes that can occur in the field. And of course, I think, what's for us important as evaluators is that what all we saw, which was like very heartwarming stories in the field, actually then sort of translated into actual results when we completed the evaluation. So those are my initial thoughts about TAR.
No, and I think in that sense, I definitely echo the sentiment that when the pathway to progress and the gaps in learning become evident and tangible for the teachers, I think it is in the teachers' innate nature to react and want to do something about it. And as long as we're able to equip them and sort of channel that emotion, I think there is definitely a lot of scope for us to transform the way teaching and learning is perceived currently in the classroom. So thank you so much. And I think with this we'll sort of jump right into the first sort of perspective to tackle when we think about teaching at the right level or level-based learning is more from a policy lens. Now, we have already seen that schools are multi-grade, and this is also predominantly a rural phenomenon. And what happens also in rural context is that children from the same family often study in the same classroom. So it's like my elder brother or my younger sister is studying with me. And while currently they learn from different textbooks. So if I'm the elder sister, I'm getting a grade 3 book and my younger brother is getting a grade 1 book, right? But assuming that I cannot read letters and my brother also can't, under level-based learning, it's highly likely that I will learn to read the letters together. I will be learning with my brother, irrespective of my age, right? And from how does this affect, parental perception, or what has been your experience around parental perception around, particularly either siblings or even relatives being grouped together, even though there is age difference in between them? Harini, if you want to get us started this time.
Sure. So I think I want to start off by saying that a lot of parents actually don't know how their children are faring in class, right? And I think in a very small sort of a exploratory study that I had done, what I had actually found was that it was a very simple thing that we did. We showed like a question or a passage to the mother and said, "Do you think your child can read this, or do you think your child can solve this question?" And then we actually had the child do it, right? And this was done separately so that the child doesn't get beaten up by the mother, which also happens, by the way. And we found that there was a huge difference in the mother's perception of what the child can do and what the child can actually do, right? So I think the first thing for us to really sort of sensitize to the parents is that this is where your child is at, right? It is going to be a difficult conversation. There's definitely going to be some sort of a blame game going on. I have been sending my child to school. What is happening in schools? All these things, right? But this is where I feel like COVID is a silver lining. So you just blame COVID. Say it's because of COVID that it's happened, right? It's okay. Let's use it for something good. So I think the problem over here is that in a way, this is also a good opportunity because for the first time, parents have had to get involved in children's education, whether they want to or not, right? So we've seen that a large percentage of the way that parents got involved in this thing was because they got through the WhatsApp, right? So they got these worksheets in WhatsApp or things like that, or they got these, videos which were sent to them and the children had to hear. So in a way, they've already got, and I think if I redo the analysis again, the study again, I might actually find more alignment because the parents would have actually seen the last 2 years what is happening. So I actually feel that it might not be that big of a problem when you go to the parents. I think what is absolutely needed is communication, right? So telling the parent that this kind of a learning loss or like sort of a stagnation in learning is very natural, and to be very honest, it is very natural to all of us. I think many of us would remember when we were in school, suddenly you go back after 8th grade holidays, you would have forgotten how to do factorization or something. It's actually very, very natural, right? Like there's a lot of studies to do that. So I think it's telling the parents, it's saying that don't lose hope. It's not a big deal. This happens. And this is how we are going to deal with it, right? I think that communication, not treating parent as someone who doesn't understand anything. And this tends to happen in the government school setup, right? Like, oh, parents have not gone to school. Why do we have to tell them this? Or I will just tell them this is it and they have to accept it, no question asked. We have to change the way we do that. There has to be engagement with parents. They have to know that it's completely fine if my son who's in 5th standard is sitting with my nephew who is in 3rd standard. Okay. But the idea is that how do you progress, right? So it's almost a commitment that, the government or the civil society is making to the parents that, in this year, we'll forget the syllabus. We will just focus on foundation. And we will make sure that at the end of the year, your children can do A, B, C, and D, right? So I think that's the kind of thing that we really need. And I think, there's a lot of research which says parental involvement is very crucial, especially in the early years. So why not get the parents engaged more effectively, right? Like, I think we'll talk a little bit about this multi-grade classroom and logistics, but I think it might be a good time to see, can parents or older siblings or, uncles, aunts, whoever, can they be volunteers, right? Can they help in school? I know Pratham is doing a wonderful mother's engagement program in other places. Can there be something like that where you have supplementary things, right? You have something happening in schools, but also something happening at homes, which kind of bridges the gap, right? So I think we have to be very creative about how we want to use this 1 year, because I think all of us now are in this space where everybody's focusing on learning laws, everybody's talking about foundation. So let's use it well. Let's not lose this momentum, because next year COVID will be a memory and it'll be back to, I have this much syllabus and I have to finish it.
Devyana, it will be nice to hear from you as well.
Yeah, it's funny to have Harini and I on the panel when we basically have the same thoughts. So I think, first of all, agreeing with everything that Harini said, right? I think one thing to remember is that this part about parents not knowing, I think we underestimate it. The challenge is that parents think they know, like what Harini said. So however you are identifying the problem as a teacher, as a school, as a volunteer, as an NGO worker, whatever your role is, the way that you are identifying the problem, it has to be simple enough to be able to communicate with the parents, which is often something that we forget about, right? We might, and obviously, teaching at the right level and ASAR takes this into account. That one of the reasons why the ASAR tool is the way it is because it's so easy to communicate. It's almost transparent, right? Like Harini said, even if I as a parent am not able to read, looking at that assessment tool, I know that this is lower, this is higher, and I think my child is somewhere here, right? Even if I can't myself read, it has to be visual. So whatever we are trying to do, if we're trying to change something radically, and I believe that following a approach like teaching at the right level is a radical shift. It's radical for the classroom, right? If we're trying to shift something so radically, we have to make that extra effort to really bring everybody on board. Parents are part of the picture, right? Like Harini said from our Haryana example, it's not just the parents. Teachers don't know either. Teachers will have children coming back after COVID and still think that they will have the skills that they thought they had pre-COVID. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's not because teachers are ignorant. It's because teachers are optimistic, I like to believe. I believe teachers want their children to do better, right? So I think, yes, okay, this is a problem. I'm a teacher in Bihar. This is a problem in my state, but not in my classroom. So that starting point of identifying the problem and being able to concretely say where each child is a very important starting point. And as I said, teaching at the right level, Asar, is one way. There may be many other ways to do that, but you have to be clear about where you're starting and where you want to get to, right? That goal, everybody has to buy into that goal. I mean, you'll rarely find a parent, if you say that today your child is not even reading words, you'll rarely find a parent who will say that, oh, no, but you cannot just focus on helping my child learn to read. He has to learn how to do science, right? They'll understand immediately that this reading and math is very, very important because it's the building blocks. So even if I haven't been to school, even if I don't know what's going on in the school, having something so simple and tangible that can be communicated clearly is a very important factor in engaging parents. As Harini said about COVID, I think absolutely true. How do we use the fact that COVID, quite honestly, put parents in the driving seat, right? This is what happened because there was no way to support children. It had to come from parents, or it had to come from a sibling. It had to often come from the grandmother, whoever was there to be able to support the child. So even people who first felt that they were disconnected from children's education, COVID has often pushed them to get engaged. So how do we keep that momentum up, right? I think that's important, and it's very natural for school systems to disconnect from the parents because it's extra work, right? And this is not just the case in India, this is the case all over the world. In every single African country in which we work, as soon as we say, what about the parents, the teachers and the head teachers, and everybody's like, no, that's very hectic and that's going to take a lot of work, or we don't know how to engage the parents don't understand, they blame us, these things that Harini said. But there are simple ways to build that connection, and I think as an education ecosystem, we have to appreciate that. So not put the burden on the parents, right? You're not saying that, okay, now it's your responsibility to make sure children learn, but that you can be part of this process really helps bring parents on board. And I think that's been our experience everywhere, not just in India. But another point that Harini made, I just want to talk a little bit more about that, was this thing about progress. So just saying that there's a problem and then going and doing your own thing is not going to get you buy-in, right? That progress needs to be shared back. Now, with an approach like teaching at the right level, what happens often, and for anybody who's been in a teaching at the right level program or classroom, the change becomes very visible, right? And that's because, we're focusing on very basic skills. As children go from, looking at letters, like not knowing what the hell this is, to being able to read text, there's a huge transformation, not just in their skill, but also in their body language, their confidence, their interest in the classroom, right? Because now suddenly I've gone from black to clearly seeing, black and white and making sense of what's in front of me. So when it becomes very visible that there is positive change, some of these challenges that may come up earlier, that, oh, why aren't you teaching my child English? Why is my child not studying the curriculum? Why are you mixing grades? They go away on their own. But the system or the NGO or the volunteer, whoever it is who's getting started on this process, has to have the ownership and the commitment to stand their ground, right? You can often say, oh, the parents are just being difficult, we can't do this. I mean, and this is, to be very clear with you, this has happened in context. When we started out in Zambia many years ago, this is what the government system said. They said parents are never going to allow this, right? When they find out that their grade 5 child is sitting with grade 3, they're going to get very upset. But rather what happened was, 2 days into the program, there was a father who walked up to school with their child with a bunch of sticks. And he said, this is the first time my child has come home and asked me to help her with something to do with the classroom. And I was very intrigued and I wanted to come and see what's going on. Because we told the kids, you need to go back and get sticks tomorrow because we're going to do bundles and sticks. And it was the first time that the child was actually able to go and say, Dad, I need your help. I need to collect these sticks and take them to the classroom. So I think we have this negative perception of, parents being too busy, parents thinking it's the school's way. But there are simple ways, I think, to engage and involve parents. And that can make a huge difference and not to say that these challenges won't be there. I think they'll always be there. But standing your ground and making sure that, communication is clear makes a huge difference.
Definitely. And I think the example that you shared was like sort of spot on, right? Where there's an activity that we give children so that they go and engage with the parents is also a very, very effective way of keeping parents motivated and invested as we look at, the upcoming school year. But Devian, I want to take a very small point that you had mentioned about, the parents blaming the school system, right? And definitely, as Harini pointed out, COVID in that sense has given a silver lining because we can blame COVID as a net result. But I think often the questions that we get asked is that so far the idea is that if I am a child in grade 3 and if I can't read, the onus of that responsibility or that blame in that sense is on the child. The parent will say, my child is not able to read, right? And the moment as a system, when the problem is acknowledged and let's say we are trying to solve it by giving the child a level appropriate material, it almost looks as if, okay, why are you giving my child something that they should have been studying 2 years ago? I can see that my younger brother, my younger ward is studying this. Why are you asking the elder sibling to do this, right? So it sort of makes the problem visible. And while I don't think I deny the power of advocacy efforts, I just want to hear a little bit more about, how this, the entire game of blame shifting, right? Right now it shifts from the child to when the system acknowledges the blame is almost on the system, right? And I think that is the sort of the political struggle that often comes in, in way. So I just want to hear a little bit more about, your perspectives or even your experience around navigating some of these in other contexts, maybe.
Yeah. Thanks, Shrivatsan. So I'll get started and I think Harini may have thoughts as well. So I think that, first of all, let's talk about education systems for a minute. I think when, an idea or an approach or an innovation is brought into a system from the system, it completely changes the way, teachers, schools approach the challenge or the sort of the big goal that's in front of them, right? And I think that same when the system itself is trying to engage the parents, I think that's something that becomes so unique and almost for parents, it's almost like, okay, the system is trying to do something to reach out to me. I think in those scenarios, these situations will be less likely. When it's more challenging is when, taking our own example, you have something like an Asar, right? Now, something like an Asar is outside the system, technically. I mean, it's not outside the system because children are in your system, but it's outside the system in the sense that it's not by the system, right? And that becomes something then to protect yourself against or almost to fight against. Then it's harder to get the buy-in of the system to say that, okay, I acknowledge this problem, right? And that's been a struggle with Asar for years. What is the purpose of Asar, right? The purpose of Asar is that help you understand the problem so that you can find a solution, right? It's not to blame you. It's not to say that systems are rubbish. It's to say that this is where we are and we need to make this better, right? But because it's not often coming from inside the system, it can be perceived negatively and you become caught up with trying to defend that. rather than trying to solve the problem. I think it's similar with parents, right? I think when they see, I mean, to give you an example, when we were in school, right? When a school teacher will tell the parent that I will not take your child in the science stream because your child is not ready, right? Now that's somebody that's outside of my comfort zone telling me something that I'm not comfortable with. But if a child will come to a parent maybe and say, I think I want to do this over this, it'll be, probably easier, I think, for parents to understand. And I think something similar happens when we as external actors try to go to parents directly and engage on something that's happening within the system rather than trying to push the system to engage. So I think that and this happens all the time, right? So when we start in Pratham, we work broadly in two ways. We work directly, as we say, where we have Pratham volunteers, we have Pratham staff who are working actively with children, either in school spaces or in communities, but they are the ones actively working with children in trying to improve learning, right? And there it's our job, because we are the ones engaging with the children, it's our job to engage with the parents. And there we often see this blame situation, right? And there's really not much that we can do to control it, because the change is not coming from the system. But when you see the change coming from the system itself, I think that changes the parents' perception, right? Because then if I am saying as a system that, okay, we have understood that this is the issue with learning. I'll give you an example. I was in Madagascar some years ago. And there JICA is working with the government of Madagascar on what they call the School for All program. And at that time, they didn't really have a teaching at the right level intervention, but they had picked up the ASAR tool. Right? And they had empowered schools with the ASAR tool. So they had version of the ASAR tool that was built for the Madagascar context, so in the local language, etc., adapted. And they had empowered the schools to say, you guys work with the community, because there's so many children, right? You're not going to be able to do it on your own. Work with the community to quickly assess all the kids in your school and understand what's happening with learning. And then discuss together and come up with a goal. And I saw that in action, and I think that's when I realized the power of something like an ASAR tool. It was just a means to get two groups of people who would otherwise never work together, connected in such a strong way, and be committed to this common goal, right? And this is not easy. I'm not saying, especially not easy to institutionalize in a system, but the kind of response and ownership that came from parents and the school systems there, you don't see that, right? You don't see that when it's this traditional sort of a teacher will call a parent to complain about a child, or a parent will come to teacher to complain about the lack of their children's progress, because we both think that the other is responsible. If we step away from that for a minute and say, okay, we both need to work together first to figure out what the problems are, and then set the goals for ourselves, I think that changes the situation completely. And that's a huge mindset shift, right? Which is going to take, I don't know how long to happen in our school systems and in our communities. But organizations like ours can play a part in that. How do you bring these two entities, the school and the home, closer together, so that it's not about learning happens in school and morals happen at home or anything else, but really it's a joint effort. Everybody cares about the child, right? At the end, you said this in the beginning about child-centric classrooms. It's not just about classrooms, right? It's about the ecosystem around the child, caring about the child's development. And if we start from there, I think we're already at a completely different place, right? Rather than thinking about what I as a school have to achieve or what I as a parent have as ambitions for my child, we have to think from the child's point of view. What's that common piece that ties us? And I think it can be quite simple.
Thank you for that. I think we can sort of segue with this into the pedagogical and a little bit of the logistical perspectives, right? I mean, we touched upon it initially, that given the multi-grade context, there is sort of again opportunity in that sense to implement a very strong level-based program. But just to hear from, again, your experience of implementing these programs, in what ways does the implementation of a level-based teaching model, let's say, ease the transaction inside the classroom, or how does it, let's say, improve the quality of transaction in the classroom in general, especially in multi-grade contexts? Harini, if you want to share a little bit, that will be great.
Sure. So I think one of the reasons I always felt that teaching the right level or level-based learning should actually be an easier thing to entrench in a way is because schools are already used to having multi-grade classrooms, right? So I remember having a conversation with like a district level official saying that you're going to make a fifth standard person sit with a third standard person. That person's going to get, like, that child is going to get psychologically, disturbed. And I was like, but you already have multi-grade classrooms. What are you talking about, right? So I think it's that thing, right? When you already have this, it's almost like your field is already set. The only tweak you have to do is that it's the ability piece. So I think that way, I will be very honest. I think it's not moving to level-based becomes child-centric, and we know that it works for the child. But I don't think it is going to make the life of the teacher any easier, okay? And I think that is because fundamentally the way a pupil-teacher ratio is defined in the RTE is not right, okay? So we have this 1:35. That makes no sense. You either have one teacher to a class, and if that class is larger than some 35, have more. But I have been to schools where there are 50 kids from 1 to 5, and there are 2 teachers. And that's why we have multi-grade classrooms. So how is teaching at the right level going to help? Because you still have 5 groups or 4 groups or 3 groups, right? So it is going to be a struggle. So for me, I always felt that while this is a fantastic program for the children, for the teachers in a way, because I feel like at the end of the day, any teacher will be happy to see a child progress over the years, visually, and that's something which is very good. It's not actually going to ease the burden of dealing with a multi-grade classroom. It will just ease the fact that you might have to, when the group that you have, instead of doing it like I will teach, like I've seen multi-grade, 15 minutes with first standard, 15 minutes with second standard, right? Like that flip. Now the flip will happen for groups. So at least, maybe the groups that way I think will be more cohesive and it'll be easier for the children to work in. Otherwise, this is a challenge. This is a manpower challenge which has to be dealt at the manpower level and not really at the pedagogical level.
Just to add, I think that when we are talking about multi-grade setups to deliver varied curriculum to a set of children, I think that's a very, very complex challenge. So I was in Peru several years ago now, and they are very small schools, right? So they are trying to make schools accessible for children. They are small populations compared to us, so their schools are small. You go to a rural school, there are 5 kids in school. Now, how can I justify 5 teachers for 5 kids? Clearly, I can't, right? So I have 5 kids. They've all progressed, grade 1, grade 2, 2 kids in grade 3, 1 kid in grade 5, and I have 1 teacher. And honestly, that teacher doesn't really have a problem of foundational skills. So I think we're talking about 2 very different things, right? So she knows that because she just has 5 kids, she can often go and give, direct attention to every child and try to, balance. Okay, today, for these grades, these are the activities I'm going to give them based on their, can I kind of, prolong individual activities to kids, and then I become like a facilitator in the classroom, right? That's one way to deal with multi-grade curriculum teaching. But what happens is that when those kids in grade 1 are not at grade 1 level, right? And I think that's really what our challenge is. It's not about delivering curriculum to a mixed group of children. It's about trying to deliver curriculum to a mixed group of children who are at mixed levels. So multi-grade teaching is another ball game. Multi-level teaching is something completely different. And I think what I've seen with teaching at the right level over the years is that there are some strategies that are used at that level, which are developed very specifically for reading and math, but that can be used by teachers in a multi-grade set, even if they're not just focusing on reading and math, right? So to give you an example, and this is also something that I saw in Peru, which they were trying out, is that they would choose a theme for the day, right? So imagine a teaching at the right level. For example, this is like you've chosen a specific topic in math, or you've chosen a specific story in reading, and you're going to try to make that the anchor of activities, but then you're going to various different types of activities related to that. So what they tried to do in Peru was pick up a theme-based curriculum, and then on that theme. So if that theme is mountains, for example, what should a grade 1 child know about mountains? What should a grade 2 child know? What should a grade 5 child know? But try to use a strategy like in grade level, we say whole class activity, right? So you're doing something about mountains with everybody, but then you're dividing children into their different grade levels or learning levels, whatever the case may be, and giving them different adaptations with that theme that you have introduced and engaged with as whole class, right? So how does teaching at the right level do that? We say, okay, we're going to do a story, right? So we're going to do a story with everybody. So everybody in grade 3, 4, 5, we're all together. We're all going to read a story. Everybody can participate in a story because I'm talking, you're reading. Go and read the story. Whoever can't read can answer a question, right? So there are many ways in which that's impactful. We can involve every single child, irrespective of their level. But then I need to know, as a teacher, first of all, that information I need to have so that I can group my children into different levels and give them specific activities related to that story that help them move forward from there, right? So again, as Harini said, it's not making life easier for me, but it's giving me tools, very practical tools to manage the situation in my classroom. And this is something that can be applied in curriculum teaching at multi-grade level as well. But often what the curriculum does is it does the opposite of empowering teacher, right? It doesn't empower the teacher. It removes all power from the teacher and says, I am important and you're not, right? So I am curriculum. You have to follow what I'm saying. You have to finish this in this much time because that's what the curriculum says. And it actually takes away all the agency from the teacher to adapt and to, and this is what we try to do teaching at the right level. So as Harini said, there's no syllabus, right? There's no burden on me as a teacher that I need to complete something that's taking over my power. What teaching at the right level tries to do is give you tools, give you practical strategies that help you take charge of your classroom, right? So I think some of those practical strategies and activities which are in teaching at the right level programs, very focused on reading and the math, can be used for other aspects as well. I was in Maharashtra now about 6 years ago, something like that. At one point, Maharashtra government had done a statewide, huge campaign for reading and math towards the end of the school year. Some of you might remember, and they had basically, taken the assessment and methodology that Pratham uses, but made significant adaptations. So something more specific for grade 3, more specific for grade 4, more specific for grade 5, but very focused on building reading and math skills. But the activities, tools, etc. was all kind of in there, but a little bit more varied than what we would do in teaching. Everybody needs to get this basic minimum. They made some stages, right? So I went into schools like 3 months after that program was over, because it was kind of like a big burst towards the end of the school year. In the following school year, I went to some of the schools near Aurangabad, and I was actually visiting the Anganwadis, right? I had actually gone to visit Anganwadis, and I happened to walk into another classroom because I generally like to do that, just see what's happening in the school, what the teacher's doing and so on. And there was a geography class going on. Right? Now, in that geography class, what the teacher had done, even though this was not, a multi-grade classroom, and the schools in most cases in Maharashtra are quite good in terms of teacher ratio. So what this teacher had done was he had discussed a topic in the classroom, which is in the textbook, not just using a text. had a conversation with the kids, and then I divided children into small groups to an activity related to that topic. Now, that was not teaching at the right level, right? It was not reading and math. It was not the Pratham program. But you could see clearly that one simple strategy that had been used in teaching at the right level, the teacher had been able to quickly, adapt that to their curriculum teaching. And I think there are many opportunities for doing that. But what happens often is that when innovations like teaching at the right level come into a school system, they become kind of, a program or an initiative in themselves. And when it's done, it's done. So I think when we are trying to help school systems with some innovations, whether it's for multi-grade teaching or it's for level-based grouping teaching, whatever the case may be, we have to make sure that teachers feel empowered enough to have complete mastery over what they are doing, so that they can use it in the future, right? That's the final goal. The goal is not just that change that you're able to see in a few years of implementation, but you want that change to stick in the system, and that's going to come from the teachers, but also from all the different levels. One more point that I just wanted to make, which I didn't know where it fits, is that teaching at the right level can be simple, not simple, straightforward, not straightforward. But it's a lot of work, right? And I think that expecting teachers to take that burden themselves is not right. So when we design teaching at the right level programs, whether it's with government systems or it's with our staff, for example, there is a mentoring and support system which is absolutely essential. Because you're expecting the teacher to do something. All these years I've been teaching that curriculum which is telling me what to do, and now suddenly you're telling me first I have to change the way my classroom looks. I have to break the barriers between me and the children. It's all about activities. I'm focused on the goals, not on the curriculum. Like, there's a lot going on, right? For me as a teacher, you're expecting a lot from me, even if it's simple, even if it's visible, even if it's fun. It's a lot. So making sure that when we are trying to empower teachers with new ideas or new strategies, that they get the support to actually deliver on that by people who've done it themselves. This is very important, right? And you'll often hear people from Pratham or Rukmini talk about this idea of leaders of practice. So if we're going to introduce something new into the system, if we're going to expect teachers to change the way they teach or to adapt, to a new way of teaching, we need to make sure that we're supporting them. And just training teachers once and expecting them to figure it out is not going to change things. We'll go back to business as usual very quickly. So whatever the innovation might be, whatever the strategy might be, if we're trying to do things radically differently, then we need to make sure that we are supporting our teachers, our parents, whatever the case may be, that there is support from people who've bought into the process that you're trying to execute, but have also done it themselves, right? They're not reading a book on teaching at the right level and trying to come and tell you whether you're doing a good job in the classroom. They've actually taught a group of kids themselves and understood what are some of the, okay, when a teacher says, I just don't know what to do with the beginner level kids in my classroom because I'm not able to give them enough attention, right? You cannot handle that question if you've not done it yourself. So that this is also not normal for our systems at all. It's not normal for our systems to think about teacher support in this way. We think about it as experts. We think about it as monitors. We think about it as inspectors. We don't think as mentors, or as practitioners who are really going to go and support teachers. So I think that's something that's going to be very important as we try to do things differently in our classrooms.
Thank you, Divya. I think it's your last 2-3 points sit well with the sort of the last theme that we had, which was basically perspectives on scale. What are some necessary conditions for scaling such a model? I think teacher mentorship is one such very critical aspect that will sort of define how we can scale such model across school systems. We are a little short on time, but I will just invite Harini for maybe highlighting, if you can, 2 necessary conditions that you think is absolutely critical for scaling such models across school systems, and then we'll take questions from the attendees. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think I just want to talk a little bit more about what Devyani said last, right? I think this is something which is very close to my heart, because I think when we started the evaluation in Haryana, we were just coming off the evaluation that was done in Uttarakhand and Bihar. And I think a starking thing that we started understanding was that, why was it the case that the teachers who could do this in Bihar during the summer holidays, 30 days, do a fantastic job, but couldn't do this in the normal course of the academic year, right? And I think the consensus was that there was really no one sort of first pushing them to do it, and there was no support. Right? And for the first time in the Haryana study, there was this effort to try and establish this support in the government itself. Right? Like, this is not just Pratham coming and helping the teacher saying do this, do that, but somebody within the system. And as Devyani said, that actually, in a way, strangely, they exist in the system, and we've interacted with them. But their initial conversations when I was having with them, they called themselves couriers. They actually said that. They said, "We are couriers, madam. We take the information from the district level and we go to the school level. Then from school level, we bring back the information to the district level." And these are teachers who've had 15, 16, 20 years of experience, who have been sort of seconded into this resource group or whatever. And they're being used as couriers. I mean, that's a shame, the shameful thing in the system, right? So what we really need is to empower this mentor monitor cadre. And I think that's the difference that you would see, where, and this is not just, policemen, right? I think that's also the thing that we have to guard against. You don't need policemen. You need people who actually support the teacher, have a genuine interaction with the teachers, try to solve their problems. And I think that is extremely important for scale, because I think all of us have worked with the governments enough to know that if the government wants it, they will run it. And they call it mission mode. And I worked a lot in North India, and they'll say, mission mode mein chalayenge, right? And you're like, okay, but this is not mission mode, right? This is your mission. This is a mission for the rest of your life, until we think about something else. And I think that's what you want to do. No mission mode. But how do you say that this is your everyday life, right? And that means much bigger things. So again, here, we should use COVID really well, right? So COVID gives you the opportunity to say, listen, big learning loss, foundation, let's do this. And then the small victories, and then later on, maybe we can change it. Maybe once this level thing is more entrenched, it will work, right? Like for other things. I think the second point for me really is buy-in, okay? So we've seen that we get buy-in from high level, right? The secretary will give her buy-in, the SPD will give his buy-in, commissioner, because they see the evidence, they see, oh, India, this has happened in Latin America, Africa, fantastic. But then what happens down the change? A letter goes, this program is being introduced, please arrange for training. No, right? We need to get the buy-in at every level, right? Like SCRT, your district people, your teachers. And I think that is missing, because they are the ones who run the program. Your secretary today is education, tomorrow will be agriculture. But we need these people, right? So I think the revolution should come from from within. I mean, now I'm talking more like an activist than an academic, but it is that, right? So I think these are the 2 points which we should really keep in mind when thinking about scale.
Thank you, Harini. I think at the end of the day, it's like, education is maybe by practice, but activists at heart. Thank you so much, Devyani and Harini, for sharing your perspectives. At this point, I would invite participants to throw any questions they have for the panelists in the chat box, so that we can get some questions from you as well. Okay, I think while we give the participants some time to think, for the questions and share, we had also curated some questions while we sent out the forms for participating today. So one of the questions that I felt was a little interesting is that what do you think is the role of technology, in, let's say, administering such a model, or do you think technology has any critical role to play, if at all, if any role at all?
Harini, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I think, we've done a lot of evaluations on just technology, right? Like technology in education. And I think there's a lot of evidence that says that technology can be helpful. It's no silver bullet. It's most helpful when it's integrated with what's happening in class, right? And it's not like this extra layer where, you have something that comes in like 40 minutes a day or something like that. If it's well integrated, then it would work. So I think for me over here, if we can find a way that the technology is integrated such that the teacher's burden that we've been talking about, right? If that can be reduced and allows the teacher to be a little bit more effective managing these different groups that he or she has to manage, I think that is where, for me, I think technology plays a very important role. And second, of course, is for me in the aspect of this kind of monitoring and measurement, right? So if there is a way for the teacher to do these assessments, to share it, and this is done across the board, I think here then it becomes extremely useful because you have this administrative data that is so rich that is coming from like the 10,000 odd schools that we will have for us to look at, right? So I think technology is useful, but please don't replace a teacher with a tablet. Use it well.
Maybe just to add some examples to what Harini said. So now in India, we know basically almost every teacher will have a smartphone. Not every parent will have a smartphone, but let's say almost every teacher will have a smartphone. If we are finding that, let's say, for example, we're trying to do this in the African context a lot because manpower is a big issue. Suppose we find that there's a particular aspect of the delivery that teachers are really struggling with. Right? Can you make a little short, video clip or a little note that you just kind of send out using this very low tech mechanisms, platforms, to make sure the teachers have quick access, right? So it doesn't become like, oh, we need to organize another teacher training and all these layers and this cascade has to go in. Let's say in teaching at the right level, we're saying that the teachers are not being able to figure out how to do that division problem, right? So someone within the system itself can actually make a little demonstration video, show how to do that activity and send it out to everyone. Right now, something like this is much more possible in a context like India where, cell phone penetration and, internet availability is much higher than contexts like the countries where we work in Africa, but it's still very useful, right? So this is an example of how technology can help a teacher do better rather than, technology becoming another burden or another sort of, issue that the teacher has to deal with. On the second point that Harini made, so especially in India and now increasingly in Africa as well, we use very simple data platforms to collect the data that, and at the core of any teaching at the right level program is that simple data on reading and math, right? That's what the teacher's using. That's what the school's using. That's what the district person's using. That's what the national is using. It's not changing, right? It's the same data that's meaningful to everybody because we're all working towards the same goal, right? So you're having these simple data platforms that allow teachers to just quickly put in one line of data, right? I put in that one line of information and I'm done. As a teacher. But then as soon as I've done that, I'm able to see what's happening in my school. I'm able to see what's happening in my district. I'm able to see what's happening in my state. That's very important, right? So using technology to capture information quickly is, of course, fantastic. And that's something that we do and can really help when you're working at scale. But how do you also use those technology platforms to push that information back? Because as a teacher, I may not have the capacity to create that graph. Right? I may be seeing in numbers what's happening in my classroom, but when I see suddenly, I've put in 5 pieces of information and I see that graph, then I'm able to visualize very quickly what my classroom is looking like, right? So I think these kinds of things, using simple technology, using simple platforms to really help teachers, to help mentors, to help decision makers get a quick understanding of what's happening in the program. And this is not just to understand progress, right? It's also to understand challenges. So using technology in that way, I think is extremely beneficial, and something that we've been using at scale both here and in the African context now.
Great, thanks. And I think a couple of questions that we have from the participants today, both are around, how can we really, what are some resources that will allow them to sort of explore level-based learning in the classroom, and how can it sort of make the activities more effective, I think from a practitioner's lens. So if you guys have any links that you want to share, I know that a lot of Pratham's content is available through the common CCBY 4.0. I forget the overall, but I know that they are available for use for public by other institutions. But if you guys want to share some, direct them to some resources, I think that will be great. Thank you, Devyani.
So maybe I can just quickly share two resources. So one is this website called the FLN Hub, which is more of a global website, and it has resources on the assessments, the types of assessments that we use in our programs and in ASAR, and also on teaching at the right level. So, but these are quite high-level global resources. So if you want to get a flavor, that's a good place to go. But we also have now the actual assessment, the ASAR assessments that are used in the Indian context. We have the that understanding the assessment and how to administer it and how to capture the data, etc. We have it developed as a course. As an assessment course. So you actually go through the different modules and you take a quiz at the end and so on and so forth. And we have this in all the different languages. So unfortunately, I don't have the link at my fingertips like FLN Hub, Srivatsan, but I'll send that to you as well, because, for people at least who are interested on the assessment side, that's a clear place where you can go and learn, download tools, etc., and really figure out how to do this yourselves.
Great, and I think another common theme of questions that we had earlier, and I think this may be the last question we may be able to take this evening, is that since all of us are going to go back into schools after the pandemic, and it's almost been anywhere between 19 to 24 months of school closure across the country, what are some things that is critical while we acknowledge the advantages of level-based learning? What are some critical things to keep in mind as practitioners walking back into classrooms? Just some initial thoughts will be great.
I think some of this is coming from me being a mother more than like a researcher, right? So I think it's important for all of us to acknowledge that it's going to be a hard re-entry, right? So I think, most of us come from very privileged backgrounds. My daughter has been doing online school, but she has her own laptop, everybody's quiet, and she knows how she has to behave when she goes to school. But a lot of the children who are going to be coming back to school might have really, really gone through tough times. Their parents might have lost their jobs. They might have even lost their parents. They might have been migrating back and forth from different states. And I think it's okay for us to say that let's take the first 2-3 months to just settle the kids down, understand them, talk to them, play with them, let them just get used to the idea of coming back to school, right? Before you go and start saying you have to learn this, right? Even teaching at the right level, though it's a very child-friendly program, you still might want to give the child a couple of weeks or a month to just settle down. So I think that is very important. And I think there's a lot of research that's coming out. And in India, of course, there's something about the adolescent on mental health, right? I think there is acknowledgement and there's openness to talk about children's mental health and how that has really deteriorated over the COVID times. And I think we talk about a lot of mental health with respect to older children, but that's true for even young children as well. So understanding that teachers have to be sort of trained to deal with these kinds of scenarios and be, almost kind of get down to their level, right? So I think one thing that Devyani mentioned earlier about teaching at the right level was the teacher gets down to the level of the children. And this is something we've seen in the field. And it was very interesting where a teacher who in earlier times used to sit and talk to the child was then after a month sitting with the child on the floor doing the activities, right? Like that's the change. And we want to change that kind of change to happen now, and not just for the teaching at the right level kind of a thing. So I think that's very important. Like, yes, learning loss is there, learning is important, but get the children to school, right? And if the children are not coming to school, find them. So I think that has to be the first step.
Great. Thank you, Harini. I think it was wonderful to have both of you here this evening with us. Thank you so much for sharing from rich experiences, not only across the country but across the globe. It was wonderful to hear about what are some, in terms of from a policy lens, how is it critical to involve the parents, make sure that they are sort of equal stakeholders in the entire process, and that it is sort of co-owned with them, and how can we really bring the school and the home closer to one another to make sure that it enables a conducive environment for children. And while we acknowledge that level-based learning may not really simplify the workload that may be on the teacher from an execution perspective, there are definitely techniques and tools that allow the teacher to maybe use the time that they have a little bit more effectively, so that they can really reach the child where they are. And and we got some interesting perspective in terms of maybe there can be a common theme with which learning can be differentiated over time. And lastly, on scale, we heard that the role of the teacher mentors is very critical, so that the teachers have that supporting ecosystem to implement such a radical change. And while we think of that, it is also equally critical to think about what is the role of the parents and the children while we make the change and shift as a system, as opposed to thinking of it as an intervention. So it was great to hear from all of you. Thank you so much. And to close the session, I think there's a poll. Thank you, Urmila, for launching the poll. It'll be great if we can answer the poll. Sorry, Harini, you were going to say something.
No.
Great. Thank you, everyone. A very good evening, and hopefully you guys have a good weekend ahead. The recording of the session will be available on the Madi website and also the other handles that Madi operates out of. Thank you so much for joining us today.